Hello, and welcome to the session that introduces project summaries and overviews of the project description. My name is Linda Vigdor, and I am the Associate Director of Proposal Development at the Advanced Science Research Center at the City University of New York. One of the things I do is run an annual 20-plus week NSF Career Grant Writing Bootcamp for CUNY faculty. So to start, the project summary and the introduction to the project description are the two most important parts of your proposal. The project summary is required by NSF. It has required elements and is one page only. The overview will be the first 1 to 2 pages of your project description. How you structure the overview is quite flexible, but there are things it should accomplish, and therefore specific information is recommended, as I'm going to explain this afternoon. Keep in mind that program directors use the project summary to help determine program fit and the type of reviewers that are needed for peer review. And reviewers will use either or both the summary and the overview to find out what are the key objectives of the proposal and to get, as it suggests, an overview of what you're proposing. Each has a different purpose, and thus different writing strategies are needed for both. And remember that either one could be the only sections that some reviewers read. For example, on a panel, there will be some reviewers that are designated to read the entire proposal, and others may only see it when the panel meets, and thus will only read either the summary or the overview and then rely on what others have to say. So this is what the project summary looks like, essentially, with some, there's always minor variations. So there will be a title. The first paragraph will be what the proposal is largely about, and I will say a little bit more on the next slide. And it has 2 required headings, intellectual merit and broader impacts, and it can only be 1 page. So this required project summary. The overview paragraph, the heading of that is not required. It is to be a description of the activity that would result if the proposal were funded and a statement of objectives and methods to be employed. So this paragraph answers the question, what will the PI do and why? What is the problem? What is the solution? And it briefly will also describe for a career proposal the integration of research and education. Do not include a literature review or prior work. 1, you don't have space, and 2, those tend to be the least interesting parts of a proposal. Intellectual merit, how would the research advance knowledge in the disciplinary field, and what is the innovation, if any? So, what is your contribution to the field? This is a really important distinction between that and the broader impacts, which is the benefits to society, which is a discussion of how would the research itself benefit society. Another aspect is, will underrepresented groups benefit from participating in the research, in the activities themselves? It is not required, but the broader impacts activities probably include some kind of public outreach component that addresses NSF mission. This means, it could be anything from K-12 students to senior citizens to policy, work with policy people. It's wide open as to what you do. However, a broader impacts is probably not going to be about having students in your lab, because that is more so an impact to the students themselves, not necessarily to society. Also remember that the project summary may be the document that becomes part of NSF's publicly searchable database, so readers could include members of Congress and journalists, as well as other researchers in your discipline. So this slide is a big picture of the elements that go into the overview of the project description. There is no requirement to do things in this order. Some things are highly recommended, but all of these things probably should be included. And what it is a map of what is coming in the rest of the proposal. So the suggestion is to write a career proposal in the first person. I is preferred. Then you could talk about we when you talk about my team, things like that, because remember, they are funding you as a single PI. It is not a collaborative proposal. And it should be an engaging overview of the entire proposal. But what you want to do is you really want to quickly generate reviewers' enthusiasm for the idea. And so a hook sentence is one way to do that, and you can quickly catch people's attention with, this is the problem that we face, and it should be a kind of specific problem. So don't say something that is so broad as to be relatively meaningless, like climate change is a problem. Most sensible people know that, and that doesn't actually give us any particular insight into what you're proposing to do. And you also want to provide a logical, easy to follow, and compelling narrative. Remember, if there is going to be any kind of broad readership of your proposal, this is the place that it will happen, at that in the project summary. So keep the jargon to a minimum. It's great to be telling a good story. That's another way to capture people's interest. It is highly recommended to include a graphic of some sort in the overview. It is a kind of a blueprint or map for the rest of the proposal, so however you lay things out in this overview, you should follow that same structure in the rest of the proposal. You should also include your objectives or aims, questions, hypotheses for both the research and education plans. And remember that if you don't generate reviewers' enthusiasm here in this couple of pages, you will not likely get it later. It's like first impressions. You have to make a good first impression. And remember that you need to get reviewers on your side to advocate your proposal, especially in a panel. So, there's a hook sentence or a statement of critical need. Why do we need your research? And then, what is it you're proposing to do? What's your solution to that problem? It's great to include a brief bit about your career vision, which is, what is the 5-year plan, and then how will this, would a career award help get you to your 10 to 20-year vision for your career? Your big picture hypotheses or objectives, don't lay out every sub-objective that you have because you don't have space in this short bit. You can briefly state what your approach is and expected outcomes. Then say something about your education plan. Then it's great to say something about the integration of research and education and your broader impacts. So I just told you all of that. So remember, again, first impressions are crucial. And both the project summary and the project description are a first impression of you and your proposed research and education plans. They're the sections that are read first, and they set a tone for reviewers. So I think it's a bad strategy to just copy the project summary into the overview or vice versa. One, it is a lost opportunity in those few pages to give reviewers a bigger picture of what you're going to do if one document is just a repeat of the other. It also makes you look a little bit lazy, and they also have different purposes, so it really doesn't make sense to do them, to copy one into the other. So key things to keep in mind, both should be compelling. So compelling is an exciting, important problem. The research addresses a critical need or a problem, and you offer a potentially transformative solution. It's coherent, reliable by overworked reviewers and by non-experts, and there is a logical structure with limited jargon. And then it should also be clear. It should be clear as to what's being proposed. It should be clear how the broader impacts you're proposing align with NSF's broader impacts criteria. And there should be a strategy, a clear strategy to integrate research and education. So here's some essential characteristics of the project summary, overview, and full proposal. I'd say it goes across all of them. Again, compelling, coherent, and clear. The project summary, remember, is a brief overview, intellectual merit, and broader impacts. And the overview itself gets to immediately what's the problem, why should we care, what's the proposed solution, what's the potential impact, why is the PI or team the best to do this project, and what are the societal impacts. So now I have one slide thinking about, so there's some ideas of how you can use the overview itself to discuss your ideas with the program director well before you're submitting the proposal. So you can send this overview to the relevant program director. It should be no more than 1 to 2 pages. Some will only want 1 page. You should make your initial contact via email and ask to discuss your idea and its fit with their program. So when should you send this? So earlier is better than close to the deadline, because close to the deadline people get quite busy, and then it also looks like you're doing your proposal at the last minute, which, even if it's true, isn't a good look. So 2 months before is a good time. Earlier if you're well along. You want to leave time to readjust your proposal if it turns out that a different program is a better fit. And I've seen this happen numerous times, that the PI waits quite a while to send it to the program officer, and then the program officer says, well, it doesn't really fit with this program, it's a better fit over here. That program agrees, but the whole proposal has to be reframed, and that, and then it's a mad rush to do that, and it isn't always successful. So what kinds of questions can you ask? So you can ask questions about how well your idea fits the priorities of the program. If you expect to need a larger budget, you can also discuss whether the program is okay with career proposals with budgets that are larger than the career minimum. It's also a good idea to volunteer to serve on a future panel for the program. That is a good way to build a relationship with the program officer as well. And you also will learn a great deal by being on a review panel. So that's what I have to say. So we'll return to live, and you can ask me questions. Thank you. Okay, so we are now going to break you up into groups, small breakout groups, and within those groups, your job is to come up with, I'd aim for about 2 to 3 questions, and then you would pin them, you post them, there's post-its, I guess, in the breakout room, so you can put those on this post-it, and then I will look through them and I'll answer as many as I can. All right, so I've looked at the questions. They're pretty good. There's a lot here. So what I'm going to do is I've started the ones that I think are the most relevant to my presentation. Some of them are less relevant, and I believe they will be answered in another presentation session. So I'll save those for later. If we get to them, we will, but there's a lot here. So the first question is, and there may be more than one of these questions, but something about, can I talk more about having a graphic in the overview? What should it include? So it's quite open. Somebody in the opening session said that a graphic is useful. So when reviewers are in a panel, they can immediately see the graphic, and it's a way to remember what your proposal is about. So think about what the graphic is for. And I would say a graphic could be anything, but what would be the most useful thing to help reviewers understand a key thing about your proposal at the start? So I think for example, and proposals are very different. If you're developing a theoretical model, I think it's a great idea to have probably a simplified graphic of the model you're proposing, because that is sort of going to drive your proposal, and you would like people to understand what that is. If you're talking about a number of complex ideas and relationships, you might lay that out. If it's an innovative methodology, maybe that's your graphic. It really depends. So there's no one answer to what that graphic should be, but it should be what it should be. It should have a purpose, and it should be clear. So remember, it takes quite a while to develop a good graphic. So just as it takes a while to develop good text, the graphic also should be developed over time. You should have people look at it and see if they're getting from it what you would like them to get, because people read them different ways. So I think that's about all I can say specifically about a graphic. It's pretty much open, but think about what it is you want to convey and what would help reviewers to remember your proposal or understand it. Another question is, for interdisciplinary research, how do you choose which program is the right fit for you? There's really two things. One is research NSF's website, with the program. See, you can look at what's been funded in that program and see if you find things that seem to align with how you think about things. It's a way to see if they funded the same research that you're proposing, which is good to know. That's one way to do it. It's important to do your research, and then you can talk to the program officers and they can help you decide. Sometimes NSF will also send a proposal to be reviewed by 2 programs. So it's better to know that while you're writing than to find that out after it's been reviewed, because then you can have a better strategy to address your proposal to 2 programs. So I'd say doing some research and talking to the program officers. For the first figure in the introduction, is it important to integrate both research and education aims? I kind of answered that in the first question, but it depends on what you're doing with the figure and what you want to convey. I think that if your project itself, if your research project is also somewhat of an education project, then that might be a good thing in the early figure. If it is not, if it's really a basic research project as well as that is integrated with education but not an education project, then maybe the figure itself should be more focused on the research. But again, there's no straight answer on that one. Key differences between the summary and the overview. I'm going to combine this with another question about why not to copy them. So one, the summary itself is 1 page, and there is 1 paragraph where you describe what the research is. What is the problem? Why does it matter? How are you going to solve it? And in that paragraph, you could also include something, a bit about your education plan, the integration of research and education. You would include your objectives. And you only have 1 paragraph to do that. Then you also have to you are required to have the headings intellectual merit and broader impacts. And this all has to fit on 1 page. The overview itself can be 1 to, I'd say, 2.5 pages. So you actually have more room. And so you can go into more detail. It has a different purpose. The project summary is possibly what would go on the NSF website if your project is funded and be available to the public. Sometimes they have you write a different summary, but generally that's what it is. The overview itself is part of the 15 pages of the project description. So it also, the overview of this project description is also serving as a map to the rest of the proposal. So however you lay it out in those first 1 to 2 pages is the exact same structure you would lay out the rest of your I would expect as the reviewer to see things in the same order in the rest of the proposal, which also means it doesn't really make sense to just copy one into the other, because the overview is probably too long to work well in the summary, and the summary is too short, and they have different purposes. Let me see, what else do I want to answer? In regards to the education plan and the broader impact section, how do you separate the two when preparing the project summary and the overview? Is the education plan integrated under broader impacts? All right, so there's many levels to this question. I think for the summary, I would talk about the education plan in the first paragraph as the integration of research and education. You could include, depending on how much space you have, you could briefly state what your education objectives are. But in the project summary, you can put the education plan in with the broader impacts. This is okay in the project summary. In the project description, if you read the PAPG, and I believe it's also in the RFP for the career award, they do expect a separate heading of broader impacts, and it should be separate from the education plan. So the way I see this is that the education plan describes what your activities for the education plan are, and there can be multiple activities. There probably should be multiple activities. One of those activities in your education plan might be a public outreach activity. That one could go under the education plan, or it could go under broader impacts. If it goes under the education plan, let's leave it there for now, then your broader impacts heading would actually focus only on the broader impacts, and that would be the broader impacts of the research itself and the broader impacts of your outreach activities. So, there's a little flexibility in there, but you do have to have, for a career proposal, you do need an education section, and you do need a separate broader impacts in the project description. I answered that question. In the overview, how should the balance between intellectual merit and broader impacts? Well, I believe that's actually speaking about the summary. But NSF is sort of getting to review criteria, I think, that NSF does not tell you how they weight intellectual merit and broader impacts. What they do say is both are significant, both are equally important, but the research itself is going to carry the proposal. So, but there are broader impacts to the research itself, probably, although not necessarily. So there is no formula here. What do I mean by career vision? Basically, that's what do you want to be known for ultimately, and is your long-term career vision. Do you want to be known for like identifying the mechanism that prevents people from getting dementia, let's say. And then your 5-year career vision is what aspect of that can you accomplish in 5 years, and how would this 5 years of research and this award help get you to this longer term vision. It doesn't include lab size. It's not, you should also have a career vision for your teaching goals as an educator, because remember, for the career award, NSF is looking to develop researchers and educators, this sort of holistic understanding of what it means to be an academic researcher. So it's not about steps for future projects and collaborations. It's more about, what is your career about? What is your interest? What do you, how do you want to save the world? Let's see. Should you have a hook in the summary? Should it be the same hook as in the overview? It could be the same hook. You could have one in both. The purpose is to, in a sentence, or to say what is the compelling problem, what is the issue that you're addressing, and what is your proposed solution. You can change the wording, because also the way I look at it as well is that if people are reading the project summary and then they read the overview, if they read this same thing again, then one, it's not that interesting. It sort of indicates, well, maybe I don't have to read this because I've already read it. And it's also a lost opportunity for you to reframe things a little differently. So the hook sentence is probably the only thing that might actually be the same. If you wanted to, you could switch that up. Should you include educational plan in the first email you send to the program director?
Linda, I think you'll be switching soon. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'll say yes. How's that? All right.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for that, Linda.